The snow began falling so suddenly that it felt like the sky itself had collapsed onto the highway. One moment the road outside Aspen Ridge, Colorado was quiet and clear beneath a pale winter sun. The next moment it vanished under a violent swirl of white. Visibility dropped to almost nothing. The wind howled like a warning siren across the empty mountain road, and my car skidded just enough to make my heart slam against my ribs. And sitting beside me in the passenger seat was the one person I least wanted to be trapped anywhere with. My boss, Margaret Hale. She was known throughout our company in Denver as the woman who never smiled, never forgave mistakes, and never allowed excuses. People whispered that she had built the entire Hale logistics empire from nothing but discipline and relentless ambition. Employees respected her, feared her, and kept their distance from her. I was just a junior analyst named Aaron Mitchell, 3 months into the job and still trying not to lose it. And now we were stranded in the middle of a snowstorm together. Before we go any further, if you believe that even the coldest moments in life can lead to unexpected kindness, take a moment to like this video, comment where you're watching from, share it with someone who loves heartfelt stories, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps these stories reach more people who need them. The storm worsened within minutes, the windshield filled with thick snowflakes that looked like flying ash. The road disappeared completely, and my tires began slipping on ice hidden beneath the powder. I pulled the car to the side near a small wooden lodge that looked half buried in snow. The sign hanging above the porch read, "Timberline Guest Cabin." The building lights were off, the parking lot was empty, and the wind had begun to roar through the trees like an approaching freight train. Margaret stepped out of the car first, wrapping her coat tightly around herself. Even in a storm, she carried herself with the same sharp composure she had in the office boardroom. Inside the cabin, we found a single small room warmed by a fireplace that must have been left burning by the caretaker. The place looked like a forgotten retreat. Wooden walls, an old couch, a small kitchen corner, and one bedroom. Just one. Margaret opened the door to the bedroom and paused. There was only one bed. She stood silently for a moment before turning back toward me. Her voice, usually calm and controlled, carried a strange mix of resignation and practicality. The temperature outside had already dropped far below freezing, and the power flickered once before stabilizing. If the storm lasted all night, leaving the cabin wasn't an option. Hypothermia was a real risk in these mountains. We didn't say much after that. The situation spoke for itself. The hours that followed were some of the most uncomfortable of my life, not because of the cold, because of the silence. Margaret Hale, the woman who ran a billion-dollar company with ruthless precision, sat across from me on the couch staring into the fire like someone carrying invisible weight on her shoulders. For the first time since I had met her, she didn't look like a CEO. She looked tired. Outside, the storm intensified. Snow slammed against the windows in violent bursts, and the wind rattled the wooden walls. The mountains were swallowing the world around us. Eventually, the fire dimmed, and the cabin temperature began to fall. Margaret stood slowly and walked toward the bedroom again. There was no pride in her voice now, just logic. Only one bed. Only one way to stay warm. We both understood the reality of the mountains in winter. And so the night became something neither of us expected. We lay on opposite sides of the bed at first, stiff and silent, like two strangers forced into the same photograph. The wind screamed outside, and the storm showed no sign of stopping. Hours passed. Then something strange happened. Margaret began talking. At first it was small things, the company, the business trip we had been returning from, the mistakes I had made in my early reports. Her voice held none of the sharp criticism I expected. Instead, there was something almost reflective in it. Eventually, the conversation drifted somewhere deeper. She told me about how she started the company after her husband died 15 years earlier, how she had raised 2 daughters while working 18-hour days, how every employee mistake reminded her of how fragile success really was. I realized something in that moment. Margaret wasn't cruel. She was terrified of losing everything she had fought for. The woman everyone feared was simply someone who had never allowed herself to be vulnerable. The storm raged through the night like a living thing, but inside the cabin the silence slowly transformed into something warmer. Not romance, not attraction. Something more human than that. Understanding. Near midnight, the fire died completely, and the room grew colder. The mountain air crept through the old cabin walls. Instinctively, we moved closer under the blankets, not out of awkwardness but necessity. Two people trying to survive a winter night in the Rockies. Outside, snow buried the world. Inside, something unexpected thawed between us. Margaret eventually stopped speaking and simply stared at the ceiling for a long time. Then she said something so quiet I almost didn't hear it. She admitted she had forgotten what it felt like to trust someone. Morning arrived slowly. The storm weakened just as the sun began pushing pale light through the frost-covered windows. Snow had piled several feet high outside the cabin, but the sky had finally cleared. When we stepped outside, the mountains looked completely transformed, silent, glowing, and peaceful beneath endless white. It felt like we had survived something bigger than a storm. The drive back to Denver took hours because of the snow-covered roads, but the atmosphere in the car had changed. Margaret was still serious, still composed, but something softer had settled into her voice. At the office the following Monday, the entire staff expected the same strict CEO they always knew, but something small had changed. Margaret began listening more. She started mentoring younger employees instead of intimidating them, and one afternoon she called me into her office. Not to criticize my work, but to offer me a promotion. She told me that night in the mountains had reminded her that leadership wasn't about control, it was about trust. Before this story ends, I want to ask you something special. Comment the word warmth below if you believe even the coldest situations in life can bring people closer together. Because sometimes the storms we fear the most are the ones that reveal the humanity we forget to show. Margaret Hale remained one of the toughest leaders I ever worked for. But after that night, she was also one of the fairest. And every winter when snow begins falling across the mountains of Colorado, I remember that strange night in the cabin, a night when a snowstorm trapped a nervous employee and a feared CEO together, and somehow melted two very different lives. If this story touched your heart even a little, please take a moment to like the video, comment your thoughts, and share it with someone who believes in second chances and unexpected kindness. Because sometimes, all it takes to change someone forever is one storm.